All right. And I believe we are live. And if we are and I'm looking crazy, you'll just bear with me. Okay. Hello, good evening, BSTARS. It's me, Tiana Piles, co-founder of BSTARS, breastfeeding sisters that are receiving support. I am joined by some just wonderfulness that I am missing from the east and southwestern corners of the United States. Camie Goldhammer and Kimberly Moore-Salas. What's wrong with me? Okay, nervous. I told
That's
y'all.
right.
Um, so welcome to our BSTARS Meetup Live this Wednesday evening. I'm hoping that you all are all well and everything is going good and you're healthy on this eve of Thanksgiving. And so, in fact, we're going to talk about that with our Native sisters as well. But what I'd like for them to first do is to introduce themselves, talk about why they're so passionate about the work and the work that they're doing with the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor organization, and just have a good old time with my sisters because I miss them, and this is just how we have to
Yes.
connect. So, Camie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, and yeah, I love Tennessee. I love my dog. My dog behind me. Her name's Memphis, after Memphis, Tennessee. I just it's my favorite. One of my favorite places. But um, yeah, so hi, I'm Camie Goldhammer. I'm a clinical social worker and a lactation consultant in IBCLC, and I'm the founder and creator of the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training, which Kim and I teach together. And we'll I think get a little bit more time to talk about that, but gosh, why am I so passionate about breastfeeding? That's a long question. You know, I could spend probably hours talking about why, because there's so many reasons why why I am. But kind of my background is I kind of specialize as a social worker in the effects of intergenerational trauma, or trauma that's been passed down from generation to generation, and the impacts of that trauma on things like attachment and bonding and first relationships or parenting practices in the Native community. I'm Sisseton Wahpeton, that's my tribe, from South Dakota, and I'm here in the illegally occupied territory of the Duwamish people, also known as Seattle, for most everyone else. But I mean, for me, I became a breastfeeding mom in 2009. I was the first to breastfeed in several generations, and it was a really powerful experience for me. I mean, to make a very long story short, in the moment I nursed my daughter for the first time, I felt my ancestors there. I saw them there. I, had been wanting them and wanting to know their presence for a big part of my life. And it finally, it was like when I became a mom and put my baby to the breast, that's when they showed themselves to me. And so it was a really powerful, experience. And to this day, I'm so grateful that I didn't have any problems, because I don't know what I would have done. I was a non-committed breastfeeding mom. I decided to breastfeed at the hospital, and so I really didn't have access to, or I wouldn't even know where to go to get help or support. I honestly don't even know if breastfeeding had not worked out, if that would have even been a problem for me, right? Like, I think I probably would have just been like, okay, let's move on. But I, had this experience with nursing my daughter, which again was, very life-changing, very healing for me, because we ended up with a traumatic surgical birth. And so, breastfeeding her was a big part of my healing, of knowing that my body carried her for 42 weeks and then it breastfed her, no problem, for 4 years. And so I knew that my, the labor part wasn't my body's failing, right? Because it had done what it needed to do that whole, with my pregnancy and nursing. And so I think it was a really healing experience for me in that way as well. And then I, just started learning a lot more about breastfeeding and learning about the, our low rates in the Native community, making those connections, we share, often, I don't know, are often at the bottom. We fight for the bottom with our Black sisters and brothers, a lot of times in our health statistics and our rates and things like that. And, recognizing our astronomical SIDS rates, heart disease, diabetes, all of that is, epidemic in the Native community. And, as I learned more about breastfeeding and those connections, it just became something I can no longer ignore, right? Like I just was full on, completely committed, really felt like I needed to share the word, of breastfeeding all around. And so, that's the gist of it. And I think we can maybe talk about IBC and things like that after Kim. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I did have a question. Yeah. You said you decided to breastfeed in the hospital. Was there anyone that or a thing or a thought that helped you to make that decision in the hospital?
Yeah. So I, going into when I was pregnant, and some of obviously Tiana and Kim have heard me talk before, but one of the things I share is that I was a mom that was, I was 28 when I had my kid for the first time. She was completely planned. I was married. We were ready for kids. We had jobs. We owned a home. Like we had, so much stability. We used midwives, hospital-based midwives. I did centering pregnancy. I was kind of like this perfect candidate for having been talked to about breastfeeding by somebody, and no one did, right? Like no one actually did. And so I say, like, I don't think it crossed my mind how I would feed my baby. I didn't think about breastfeeding. I also didn't really think about formula feeding. I was very focused on birth and labor and what that was going to be like, that I just didn't think about it. And so when I got to the hospital for my induction, because I was 42 weeks pregnant, my nurse, who I credit so much of where I am with, like, how she supported me. But she's the one who said to me when she was hooking up my IV, she goes, "You're going to breastfeed your baby, right?" And it was just the way she said it. Like, it was so matter of fact. She made an assumption that me as a Native woman, of course, I would choose the best thing for my baby, right? Like, there wasn't anything else there. And I just said, yeah, I'm going to do that. And that was that. And then, I had as many inductions go, I had a 24-hour induction, and throughout those 24 hours, she shared with me different information about things like skin to skin, nursing as soon as possible, not giving bottles, those kinds of things. She kind of told me all of that throughout my induction. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Kim. Hey, who are you and why are you so passionate about all this breastfeeding work?
Oh, gosh. Well, my name is Kimberly Moore-Salas. I am Navajo, the Nen Nation. I was born in Tuba City, which is a Navajo nation. Both my parents were both Navajo. That they actually spoke Navajo, but they didn't speak it in the home. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, which the weather is still amazing. It's now getting cooler. We were at 90, 92, 3 last week, and now we're coming down to like the 70s. So it's very, very nice. I reside on the Pish Posh and Atham land. So this is the desert tribes of Arizona. So there's 23 federal recognized tribes in Arizona, and Navajo, most people know, maybe, as Navajo is the largest federal tribal nation in the United States. how I become a lactation consultant, or why I'm passionate about it, is I started in the WIC peer counseling program. So I started as a peer counselor. And as I started learning about breastfeeding is actually when I learned about what the breast milk does and how it changes every time the baby goes to the breast, and just the amazing things that it does to mom and baby, and just like the timing of delivery, like bam, mom goes in this clock, and just knowing just the whole antibodies, how it's made when mom gets a virus or vice versa. It's just all those things just fascinated me. And I think as far as my passions, I just kind of learned as I started evolving into a lactation consultant. And then working with WIC, seeing a lot of the moms that look like me, because the WIC I worked for was Intertribal Council of Arizona WIC. So it was a Native Health WIC. So I saw a lot of moms that looked like my mom when she had my sisters. My sister's 13 years younger than me. And when we came from the reservation to live in the urban setting, was very hard, transition was very hard from going to reservation life to the city. So we did a lot of like bus rides, food stamps, walking, the situation wasn't, we weren't ready for it. So just, getting acclimated to that situation when you're what, 9 or 10. So I started working for WIC, and then I became certified in 12. I always get this confused because Camie is 1 year behind me.
Yeah, 2012.
That's that time. See, Camie
I was
certified. And so I actually got a job at the county hospital, which is now Valleywise Health, and I'm a hospital lactation consultant, and I'm the only one that serves 4 areas of the hospital. And so when Camie talks about her story, just a lot of that just resonates with me, and how she was able to be supported with breastfeeding, and just how she didn't have those resources after. So the hospital I work at, we have lots of families from all over the globe, a very diverse population. Now that our Phoenix Medical Center closed their labor delivery department recently, some of the Native moms are now having their babies at our hospital where I work at. So I've been seeing those moms and helping them, get situated with breastfeeding and follow up. But yeah, so I'm just, I think the equity work is really where I'm at now. I think all the passions kind of came to this part of my work with Camie, and providing, access to more support, but also access to inspiring breastfeeding lactation consultants of women of color. So I just started a mentorship program. I'm not sure if you saw some of my postings I've been doing on Facebook. I started the first lactation mentorship clinical program at our hospital. So my intern starts December 7th, and she's Hispanic, Latina. And so just a very diverse group of interns that will be starting their journey with me. And I'm very, very excited about that.
Yeah, that is exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm really excited.
That's amazing. Girl, of course, peer counselors rock, because that's how I can start my journey to peer counseling. So that is awesome. Thank you for both of you all sharing. So, okay, so as we talk about you all and the work being done in the Indigenous community, you all are the co-founders of the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor and support and work with the organization. Please tell us some more about that, because as Camie talked about, a lot of our rates for our Black and brown women, unfortunately, mirror each other, and I can't wait till they mirror each other positively, when we finally, make that curve. So please tell us about the organization and the work that you all do there.
I'll let Camie start. She created the course, so.
Cool. So the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training came out of essentially my experience becoming a lactation consultant. So in 2011, I began the process to becoming an IBCLC. And the process for me took about 2.5 years. It was February 2011 is when I took my first 45-hour course, right? That was kind of like the beginning of everything for me. And the experiences that I had from that first 45-hour course, which, you know, for folks that are listening or watching today that don't totally know, pretty much all of us lactation supporters, regardless of whether we're peer counselors, IBCLC, CLCs, you know, there's a whole alphabet of different providers out there. The one thing you can pretty much guarantee is that we almost all take a 45-hour foundational breastfeeding course. Like that's just kind of part of the process. And then some folks might stop at that 45-hour course and others might move on, you know, move beyond that and get some additional education. But we pretty much all in the United States do these 45-hour courses. And so, you know, I did my 45-hour course and it was good, right? Like I learned a lot. Clinically, it was strong, but my instructor was, you know, a elder white woman. Every, you know, family that was talked about, or example in the training was a white family. You know, most of the scenarios, even the topics that were chosen to talk about, really centered white, upper middle class white families, right, or white community. And then even in the space, I mean, I don't think there was another person of color in the entire space, and it was like a class of 60 people, right? That came from all over the country to take it. So, you know, at that time I'm a social worker, so I'm very, you know, at that point, very much aware of inequities, of racism, institutional racism, structural racism, you know, all of that kind of stuff was things that were really important to me already. And as a Native person, I was very used to, you know, being silenced, being invisible, you know, in those spaces. And so, you know, I took the training. I learned a lot. Again, clinically, it was really strong, but I learned nothing about serving Native people, right? Which was always my goal. I mean, I never actually, until very recently in my breastfeeding journey, or breastfeeding professional work, I've never worked outside of the Native community. Like I've only worked in the Native community for most of my professional career. And so I just kind of got to where I was like, okay, it was pretty white-centered training. And I wrote a long email to the director saying like, hey, I think there's some things missing from this course. And then, you know, whatever. And then I continued taking other breastfeeding education because I needed 90 hours total. I attended conferences, breastfeeding conferences. I did online trainings. I did a 1.5 year long internship, which was incredible for my clinical hours. But literally every step along the way, every single one of my teachers was a white woman. Every single one, right? Like every training, little class I signed up for, whether it was in person, online, my mentors were white women who are amazing allies of mine. And I'm very grateful for, you know, what they gave me. But, you know, what was very apparent, and Aquanda Stanford, who's an incredible, you know, Black anthropologist specializing in Black lactation, is she calls it the mammification of breastfeeding, right? That like basically BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and POC people are trained to serve white women in breastfeeding, right? Like, and that's kind of what it is. Like, we're not trained to serve our own people. And that's a problem. And so, so that was, you know, kind of my journey. And then I was doing some work with Chance, which is now called Cheer at Boston University. In CHAMPS, we were doing some work to help support hospitals in the Indian Health Service and in the South. So that's one of the first places I met, I think Tiana and I met was when we were doing some work in Mississippi and East Tennessee and New Orleans. We were, there too, and working within the hospitals to, create, support those hospitals in becoming baby friendly. And that was Kellogg funded, and they were applying for a second round of funding. And Ann Meerwood, who's again another mentor and ally that I've worked with over the years, called me up and said, "I'm writing a grant for a second round of funding. What do you want to do? Like, tell me what you want, and I'll do it. I'll write it in." And I just said, I was like, I want to create our own course. I want a Native only 45-hour course that's for us, by us, that is, like truly Indigenous in every way. And she said, okay. And she wrote it into the grant, and we received the funding, along with like the additional Mississippi CHAMPS funding. And so, there was other work involved with that. But I spent the next 2 years developing the course. Oh, I should say too, kind of during that time, I also got invited by Mama Bug with Rose to come to Atlanta, and there was a group of about 10 or 12 BIPOC lactation consultants that did a kind of train the trainer with Miss Linda Smith. And she, also helped, basically really supported a lot of us in teaching 45-hour courses and using her materials. For me, I very quickly, when I went through it, I very much valued our time together and that opportunity. And it was a great way to, jump things forward. But it was very clear that the materials were not at all relevant to my, to the Native community. And so that, those kinds of things like were all happening where I was like, we need to make our own course. Like we need our own course. And for me, the way I see it, and Kim and I tell the folks that we teach all the time, is that we see breastfeeding as not a feeding choice. We talk about breastfeeding as a cultural practice and a traditional practice that was taken from our people via colonialism, right? Like it is our breastfeeding rates are a result of colonialism. And so we really look at this as reclaiming our traditions, right? And reclaiming our right to mother our babies and say we're going to be here for our kids, right? Because historically, that's not been something that Native women have been able to say for their kids for several generations, because war, famine, the child welfare system, substance misuse, we have this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. I mean, it's so compounded. And so for us, the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training is really about giving this information back to the community where it belongs, right? And we're like, we really say like, this is traditional knowledge, which means it's in our genes, right? That we have it in us. It lives here, like however you want to frame it, right? Like our ancestors gave us this knowledge, but what happens is that because we've had kind of a gap of about 100 and 150 years of no breastfeeding, on a large scale, we've certainly had families and communities that have maintained the tradition of breastfeeding, but on large part, we haven't. And so we don't have the knowledge in our brain, right? We have it in our soul and our spirit and our heart, like however you want to frame it, but we don't have the intellectual knowledge in our brain. And that's what Kim and I hope to do with the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training is we go to tribal communities or Indigenous communities that invite us to come, and we can, talk more about what makes our training different than other 45-hour courses. But one of the big ones is that we only go to places we're invited to go to. We do no promotion of the course and say, hey, you need to believe that breastfeeding is important for you, and you need to pay us to come and teach this information to. We want communities to say breastfeeding is important to us, and we want to invite this, this training to come to our community to teach our people. And so, that's kind of the gist of it. Our first training was in Barrow, Alaska in 2017. And the first training, we were still technically funded under that grant, right? The initial kind of planning grant. And then it ended, at which point Anne Meerwood and, Boston University said, it's your course. You take it, right? Like, it's yours. And so, that's what we've done, which I think also is another really great example of how people can ally. They could have easily said, we paid you to create this training and it's ours, right? But that's not what happened. They said, you created it. It's for your community. It's yours. You take it, right? So we own it, and have been spending the last 3 years training Indigenous breastfeeding counselors across Turtle Island, which is what we call North America. So, yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Anything you'd like to add, please? Uh-oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Sorry. So I was saying that Camie mentioned that how she saw breastfeeding in her family. I mean, she didn't see breastfeeding in her family. I'm sorry. She didn't see it. So when she was going to do it, that's a lot of the families that we see is they never saw breastfeeding. I saw breastfeeding in my family, and me knowing that I was going to do it was like, I'm going to do it. And I never questioned my milk supply. I never really questioned the ability because I saw my mom and my aunties do it. And then my dad talked about it. So it was natural for me in the sense that I was going to do it, but I did have problems with 3 of my girls, but they're all different. So I was able to do that. And then Camie mentioned about the breastfeeding counselor course. When we think about bringing that knowledge to the communities, a lot of times when I took the training, Camie said this earlier, is our instructors were all, white women and middle class, and talked about things that didn't apply to us or pertain to us, even the studies. And so when we were talking into just pictures or really just Camie has great pictures of it, of mothers breastfeeding that were coming from her community. And a lot of our group would identify with those things, those practices, just as they saw themselves. And that really meant a lot to us in the course, that they can relate to the pictures, to the stories. And a lot of the course included a lot of storytelling. And as she was mentioning about initially talking about colonization, when we first start a course, we talk about those things the first day. First day can be very heavy and very really sharing, and usually the next day is a lot of healing work. Just kind of folds throughout the week, and I think that's what brings this course is that unique way of identifying with each other about the historical trauma that we've all endured.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. It's amazing how important those cultural cues are. Even in trainings, sometimes people just aren't aware. And so, Camie, thank God for you to say, hey, this didn't quite, the meat of the information, okay. However, this was kind of very white bread, and there wasn't a cultural connection in some of the information in which you all, were trying to learn. And so thank God again for you, Camie, to actually say something, because usually sometimes what we do is, like you said, Camie, we're in place, we go, this was written not really for us, but we really need the information, so we'll just be quiet and we'll just process it the way we know we need it. But then moving forward, nothing improves. And so it's important that we speak up to say, this is what's going on. And like you all were saying, allyship is so important, but also ownership is important. So that was awesome how the university honored you all to say, yes, we helped you, but please go forward. This is yours. That was awesome. And not done all the time, unfortunately. So that was
No, I don't. I doubt it's ever done, honestly. Yeah, and I think too, like what you're saying, Tana, that there's so much about, for so many of us, whether we're Black, Indigenous, like we're so used to oftentimes being, especially in an educational environment, being in a white space, right? And so the thing that's been so cool, I mean, there's a couple of things with the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor training. The first one is that it is for people that identify as Indigenous. Like you cannot take it if you are not Indigenous, right? And it's self-identified, so we're not like checking tribal enrollment or blood quantum or doing like brown paper bag tests or anything like that, right? Like it's how do you identify? And there's that in itself is so powerful, because we're saying like we are creating an Indigenous space, because the thing that we've learned over, we've taught 10 courses at this point. We had to cancel 3 in 2020. So, we did teach a course in February, but is that the space that we create, like Kim said, we spend a lot of time on building a cohort, building a community within that training. So the first whole day is deep stuff. We don't even talk, we really don't talk about breastfeeding. We certainly don't talk about clinical breastfeeding. We talk about our stories. We talk about our trauma. We talk about, get really in depth, because you have to acknowledge those things before you can serve people, right? And you have to heal some of that stuff within yourself before you help breastfeeding moms, right? I mean, there's like so much that goes into it. But the cool thing that we get to do is that because it's an all Indigenous space, it's so safe, right? And so our students feel comfortable asking any question that comes to their mind. I mean, the amount of, we get random questions and it doesn't even matter what we're talking about, we're going to address it and we're going to answer it. Like, we're not going to put it in a parking lot. We're not going to, like do anything like that. We say, like, if your brain's going there, then it's going there for a reason, and we're going to address it. And, I just like the way that I see our students just become so comfortable so quickly, because they know the space is safe for them, right? And they know the space is designed for them. And, we have just really incredible evaluations, but one thing that we hear time and time again is that, students say, like, it felt so good to not have to explain my identity or explain my history or explain myself, right? We're like, so many times, thinking about, like, if I was in a 45-hour course, if I wanted to ask a question that was relevant to my community as a Native person, I would have had to give an entire historical preface, right, before I even get to my question, because I know that my instructor and everyone in the room knows no idea what I'm talking about, right? Like, if I say boarding schools, like, oh, well, several generations in our community were affected by boarding schools, like, they're all going to think like rich white boarding schools on the East Coast, right? Like, they don't even know that that Native children were kidnapped and stolen from their families by the Catholic Church and the U.S. government and taken from them and raised in boarding schools where they were trained to be servants. Like, they don't even know that that's part of the U.S. history. And those are things that we just know that in our court, right? Everyone knows that in our training. So we don't need to, we do a history. We certainly go over history in our training, but we save so much time by not having to answer questions from white people. We save so much time, and it's really nice. And then, the other part is that Kim and I as instructors, and I think this was like this big surprise for both of us, and Kim can probably speak to this too, is when I was creating the training, I was like, Native-centered topics, right? So our pictures, our stories, the names of, examples that we use, the imagery, like all of it is very Native. And then we have our Native students, right? And I knew all of that was going to make learning easier for them. What I didn't realize is how easy it was going to be for us to teach in that environment too, right? Like as Indigenous instructors, like we are so comfortable. We can totally be ourselves. I was just looking at some of our pictures because we did a training in Hawaii a year ago. I mean, it was it was in October a year ago, and those pictures were showing up on Facebook, and I was looking at those memories, and I was, looking at Kim and I in our little booty shorts in our classroom, like, because we could just like be, we're in Hawaii and we're teaching essentially outside and it's hot, and we don't have to be all dressed up and, like, right. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like we could wear cutoffs, we could wear flip-flops, we can swear, we can make jokes, we can do, we can be authentically ourselves, which also makes for a healthier learning environment for our students, right? Like all of it. Yeah. So yeah.
And we have fun. I mean, natives like to laugh, they have a lot of native jokes.
Quite fun.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And also too is like even parenting, like that kind of comes into the way of breastfeeding. After a while, you start understanding why your parents are the way they were, and their parents were the same way, right? And even just how we take care of each other, right? That's what we used to do with each other. We took care of our families. We took care of other people's children. We became those aunties to other kids. And you just see that community kind of shift in like day 2. Everyone's just kind of taking care of each other's babies. It's so great to see that, and that's what it was like, and that's how it should be. And it's been a learning for me too, because my childhood was a little bit dysfunctional, but even just sharing my stories with the community, they knew, they understood, they got it, and just knowing that it's okay to share that part of my vulnerability with them and vice versa. And I think that's why I made it easier for Cam and I just teach without, being so like proper, or even the way we dressed, Hawaii, like Camie said, I mean, I had my hair in a bun and no makeup. It was great, It was just so cool. No one cared.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. And in fact, I gotta say, I appreciate you all as you all were one of the organizations that stood in solidarity with BSTARS in August for our national walk. And so that just meant so much. Just in terms of, I didn't have to explain it much because, hey, it's like, hey, this is happening, it's happening. But it was like, everyone else is, Black organization. Why, and the Indigenous, I said, there are literally in the same situation we're going through in our sisters. I'm like, yes, that's what we're gonna do. So, and I'm so glad that you all. I want to thank you all, and I'm glad we're still having this time. Oh my goodness, August was just. Can you believe we're November already? I just here. So, just being able to officially thank you all and talk about the Indigenous Breastfeeding Counselor program. This is the amazing work that you all are doing, making the heart and head connection and helping our families to just get back to nature, get back to our ancestry. And it's just through breastfeeding, it's just like, we're supposed to be on this one thing, but it does so much for it. Even that like auntie, thing. It's just y'all are truly my sisters in this work. And like, y'all are my nieces and nephews. It's just that's how it is. And it's like, okay, but y'all are breastfeeding, lactation professionals. Yes, okay, and yes, okay, but this is mentality. So with all that being said, I wanted to ask you all, yes, we sit in November. Tomorrow is the official, pagan holiday of Thanksgiving. So what does that, how does the Native community celebrate? Please share with us that. Or, celebrate or not celebrate.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a complicated holiday. Many Native people we refer to Columbus Day through Thanksgiving as like the trifecta. Columbus Day, Halloween, and Thanksgiving just tend to be really rough holidays for Native people. But there's, certainly lots of changes. I will say, like, didn't mind the COVID Halloween. I was like, I didn't see one Indian costume. Like, this is good. And here in Seattle, we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day here in Seattle, so we don't have Columbus Day here, and so it's, that's nice. But Thanksgiving is certainly a complicated holiday. I know Kim and I talked this morning, and we were talking about what we're making tomorrow. And I think that, lots of folks will, may be surprised or may not be surprised to know that, probably most Native people celebrate Thanksgiving. But we certainly do not celebrate it the way many other people do. And for the stories, the kind of story of Thanksgiving, my girls are in 6th grade and 3rd grade, and they've been, roll their eyes at me all week because I get to hear their teachers, right? Because we're doing virtual learning, and I've been getting to hear them talk about Thanksgiving, and I'm like, hey, tell them that's not true. Tell them that that's going to happen. Like that's a lie. Hey, unmute her. Like, those kinds of things. So, it's one of those things that's it's a tough holiday because we know it's completely based on a myth. And this kind of concept of Thanksgiving, or first Thanksgiving, and Native people and white folks kind of coming together like that did not happen. It did not happen that way. And so, we definitely don't celebrate that myth in my home. But we like stuffing, and we like pumpkin pie, and we like, we still like to get together with family, and that's really important to many, I think most people, family is really important. And so, it's something that we've kind of always celebrated, just in a different way, right? Like just the kind of story of it is different. But yeah, Kim, how about you guys down in?
Well, we went through a weird transition, and learning a lot of this history, and I think it actually started more with my husband, because he's a big reader. And when I met him, I was just like, a lot of urban natives in my generation, coming from reservation to here. I mean, we were a little bit different when it came to like the way we thought about colonization. It's almost like just survival. You come off, your parents were boarding school, so they want better for you, and you have to do better. You have to finish school. You have to do all these things, but you get lost in that whole translation of what that looks like and how do you maintain your culture. So with me, I think when my daughters are asking me questions when we were small, like Camie was saying with her kids, they were asking me a lot of questions about me, and I used to get a lot of questions like in my when I was younger and working in like sales. A lot of men would say, you look like Pocahontas, or even women, you look like Pocahontas. And I didn't know what that meant. I'm like, okay. And then as I start learning more about it, my daughters are asking questions and watching it, and then learning about Thanksgiving, They joined a Native Youth Council here in Phoenix for urban natives, or an intertribal youth council. Mm-hmm. And that's when they started talking about history. My husband started doing research. I started learning. My kids started speaking some Navajo, introduced themselves in Navajo, and then learning songs. And they're the ones who got me to think, oh, wow, I'm missing something. And then when I got more involved in the work that Camie did, I started learning even more. And then I found out that was healing for me. So the way I look at Thanksgiving is me, again, I've evolved to, I think when we grow and we get older, to getting to that wisdom phase of our lives and elderly, when we start processing things and we start going to that place and we're preparing now, my Thanksgiving is more like changing and evolving and growing and understanding myself, but understanding my family and just being grateful. Like being grateful for who I am and how far we've come, even with myself and my growing as a Native woman and my children evolving and asking questions and standing their ground in school. Like we put them in really good schools where it maybe hurt them sometimes and it didn't serve their purpose when it came to being Native children. But I mean, we took them to marches. We took them to things that really was very controversial when they were small. So they remember that. But they look at Thanksgiving differently. And I think it just really starts at home and educating your children what that means and be honest with them. Let them know the true history. Let them know what happened, even though it hurts. Right, and even though they get mad, what are they going to use that anger with, that anger for? And so I'm grateful for that growing for my family. But we celebrate it and just being gratitude and humbleness. And we do cook. I love it. We both love to cook in the kitchen together. So, it's just going to be me and my family and my mother-in-law and just enjoying each other's company. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. My family has always called it November dinner. So, turkey, we still have to eat, people are off work. But, it was very interesting how, once again, certain ideas and lies are pushed in our country. And so, yeah, we do also take this moment to try to learn about our true history in this country. And like you said, even though it hurts, it's like you still have to process it to heal yourself. And hopefully others are doing the same so that we can figure out how to truly move forward. And so once again, that our culture share that in common as well, especially with all the social unrest going on. It's like, look, we aren't really going to get any better until we got to heal some of this stuff. Just because it looks like this is a scab, we got to pick that off and actually heal it. It's not healing properly, so it's like, we got a lot of work to do in this country. And some of it's uncomfortable work, but we got to do it. We're not trying to be the angry women about it, but at the same time, it still needs to happen, and it will get better once we finally deal. But some people ain't trying to hear it still. But
yeah,
with pioneers like you, no, good Lord, so I heard you. Oh my goodness, this country. With you all blazing the way there, okay? We have to make sure that others, y'all send this beautiful example. We got to get through with a lot of love, lots of love. Thank you. Are y'all good for about 10 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I told y'all 20, 30 minutes, but like I said, I'm missing you all. We're having a great conversation. Good Lord. Okay, so we want to talk about breastfeeding around the holidays. This year, of course, a lot of travel is limited, but there's still babies being born, and and families that want to at least peek in, of course, socially distance and all that. And as we return to the new normal, we may be around some family who they are the first in their family to breastfeed, and you're going to be around other family members who maybe are not as supportive as their core group is. And so what are some of your suggestions for our moms to feel a little bit more comfortable about that in those situations?
Kim, you want to go first?
So your question is how to make moms comfortable in normalizing breastfeeding amongst their family that may not agree with it or have
Yeah,
like certain, yeah?
right. Yeah, just new mom breastfeeding. Maybe it's a mother-in-law. They're over their house, and the baby needs to eat. And usually at their house, she pops her breast out and nurses.
No.
However, maybe she brought the cover up with her, at least, but she's not trying to go to the restroom or the back
Yeah.
room to breastfeed.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that balance of respecting whose home you're in, but also knowing you got to feed this baby, and also setting an example for your little girl cousin who may at one time want to breastfeed in the near future.
When I had to, and I always reflect like on me, like if a mom asked me that question, I would really ask her how comfortable she felt breastfeeding in public, like how she felt about it, and I would also listen to like how mindful she is with other people's perception, just because she may encounter that maybe negative, feedback from family, and just kind of talk about how she would handle that, how kind of prepare her and just say not everyone may see it that way, and for me, like I think about when I would go to other people's house. I mean, it was so many years ago. It was different than it is now. I mean, we see it a lot on social media. We see it on Neighbor Breastfeeding Week, and women are very unapologetic. But for me, I felt better covering up just because no one told me to. I just felt better about it because I didn't want to let anyone see my breast. But now it's different. And I think just, asking her, asking her how does she feel about breastfeeding in public? If someone said this to her, how she would handle it, and just kind of let her understand what kind of feelings that you may have with it. And it could be a teaching moment. It could be a teaching moment for both her and her family, or if she gets there, maybe talk to her. Maybe she has a family that's hosting it, asking her if she feels like, can we have a conversation, or how do you feel if I breastfeed, in public? I guess it just depends on how she feels comfortable with her family. I mean, there might be like, kind of a funky family member where she's like, oh, I'm not going to do that here. I guess she just has to fill out what kind of environment she's at. I mean, every family is different. But I would definitely let her have a conversation with people she's going to be around with, and just see how comfortable they are with it. And again, it's how she feels comfortable about doing it in front of people. Like I know when I did it on my brothers would leave the room. I didn't care. I was like, oh, I'm going to breastfeed. And I knew I was going to get baby adjusted, pull up my shirt and my bra, and then get the cover and breastfeed. And they would just kind of like look away. But we never talked about it because that's just not our nature, with my brothers. But I find that when I'm older, it's like the women younger now, they tend to like just do it, I wasn't that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, I was a pretty, I say I was not a modest breastfeeder. I was, just kind of like anytime, anywhere. And I really didn't care at all what whatever anyone thought. And what I found is, in my advice, one is I recognize that not everyone's like that. Like Kim said, right? Like she felt one way. Like I don't expect anyone to feel the same way I did. I totally recognize that there are folks that are out there that aren't safe to be as out there as I was, like all of that kind of stuff. And so, one thing that I would suggest specifically with the mother-in-law situation, like Kiana, you mentioned, that isn't, I think that breastfeeding, when you're a new breastfeeder, that this is a time that can really, when we talk about empowerment, right? We talk about breastfeeding as something that empowers people. And it's not so much, yes, there's empowerment in the sense of like your body is feeding your baby. Like that's insane, right? Like that's magic, that your body makes milk that is perfect for your baby. But I think there's a whole other part of that empowerment that comes from advocating for yourself and your baby, right? And that these can be foundational lessons for a new parent, right? Like if you have a new parent that is nursing and is shamed or guilted or made to feel bad by her family for breastfeeding her baby, right? Like that kind of stuff. And she doesn't feel comfortable standing up for herself or feel safe in that space, that can lay a whole layer of trauma in how she parents, right? Like, how does she stand up to teachers that tell her kid is doing, this, that, and the other, or a cop, or a whatever, like all of that stuff. Like this is an opportunity to say, like, I'm the mom. This is my baby.
Right.
I'm going to do it because I'm the boss, right? Like, and that's how it is. But, I also totally understand like cultural dynamics and family dynamics and, this kind of concept of respect and, which is such a, subjective, like term, like what does respect even mean? But, I think for, kind of getting back to the mother-in-law situation, that this is a great opportunity as prior to going, if you are, with the baby's parent, the other parent. So if it's a dad or another mom or whatever, like, to let them know, like, you need to have my back in this situation, right? And like, let's talk about what's going to happen, because when we were over there at Uncle so-and-so's birthday a couple months ago, your mom said this to me and you didn't hear it because you were over by the barbecue and blah blah blah, but it hurt me, and then like now now I want you to think about like what you're going to say to your mom, because we're your family, like you need to protect us, right? And we say that all the time to partners, that like your job is to, protect and provide this mama. Cause I always explain like attachment and bonding, like babies don't attach to their dads because they share their genetic material with them. They attach to their dads because their mom loves them, right? Like the baby sees like, oh, she feels safe with him. She feels safe with her. She trusts her. She trusts him, right? Like whatever that is. And the baby connects to them in that way. That's how you bond with people that aren't your birth parent. And I just think that that's, something that families could discuss prior to heading over to family, to their families. Hopefully you're not, hopefully you're staying home and having Thanksgiving with just your, just your household. But, for folks that are, have those conversations with your partner and tell them like, this is your responsibility. It's your mom, right? Like it's your mom. You need to stand up for us and you need to talk to her. So, that would be one piece of advice, but I always say like, just normalize breastfeeding. It's so amazing how quick breastfeeding became the norm in my family again after me breastfeeding. For a long time, I breastfed my girls for a long time. I breastfed, like I said, anytime, anywhere. And it became the norm so quickly. Like it was a non-issue so quickly that I don't even remember it being a thing, I do remember like one time an auntie say, bringing me a towel. Like we stopped by her house at a garage sale and I sat on a couch to nurse my baby and she brought me a towel to cover up and I was like, no thanks, but like it just becomes the norm so fast if you just do it, right? It's kind of like hiding it and making it a big deal is really draws way more attention.
Right. Right. Like it's like that you know you can see their insecurities. You know, they're just these people in your family who just like to just, you know, when they see you, nervous or something.
Like I guess I say what I say because in a hospital setting, it's a very diverse group of people, refugees, people that have a different culture and the way they respond. Like men can't come into the room; they're not allowed. You know what I mean? Like little things like that. So, you know, kind of offer them suggestions like maybe you should have a conversation with your family first. And a lot of times this is the first time they're even standing up for themselves in some of these cultures, right? Wow. But for me, the normalizing of it got easier for me with like my youngest daughter, she's 15 now. But when she was 2, we stopped breastfeeding at 2.5. But when she was like 1.5, 2, she'd walk around with her stuffed lion breastfeeding. Like she was like, I wish I had a picture of that. But you know, she became little, like she knew what that was. And now they're like, Mom, I'm gonna breastfeed. And they're teenagers. And then when they talk about it in school and health classes, it's very normal for them. Like, oh, my mom does that. Oh, I'm gonna breastfeed, and you know. And so, I think just it starts when they're young, and it starts at home. It starts with your partner having your back and telling, like Camie said, you know, you share that baby and you share life with them. They should be able to speak up for you and advocate for you.
Yeah. And if you don't have a partner, like you all have that cousin, right? You have that sister, like you have that auntie, you know, you have that person that you know that if you need something, if you need someone to have your back, you can go to them, right? And so do that, you know, I would like call my cousin Kelly and be like, okay, Kel, like I'm going to nurse my baby and you know, Nana's going to say something. So will you, you know, like you got my back, right? That kind of stuff, right? Like have those conversations because, you know, there is someone that will be there, you know, hopefully for you too. But yeah, it's rough, but you know, and then I'll say too, like, and then give up those babies when you nurse them and they're all milk drunk and they're passed out, right? And like ready for cuddles, like give them to grandma, let her get that, you know, those juicy milk drunk baby vibes so that she knows like, oh man, when she nurses that baby, like I get to cuddle it afterward and he's so cute and chubby, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like, you know, you got to let them reap the benefits of your amazing milk too.
Yes, there are other ways to bond besides bottle feeding. You know,
yes.
I'm not gonna feed a bottle. No, you know, or other stuff. Girl, I don't know how it is sometimes in y'all's culture, but I know sometimes you feel like, oh, give that baby some, I don't know, cornbread. You know, like from the greens. Oh my goodness, you're trying to kill my baby. You know, like,
right.
It's all they need. You know, no, nothing else. And even normally, no, we don't need to add rice cereal to a bottle, you know. No.
Right.
Yep, no rice.
Yeah, no, none of that. Kim, quickly, you know, you mentioned about the hospital setting, and that was amazing to know that the partners of the fathers are not allowed into the room. And I know you're getting off work. Thank you again for joining us. Just share with us some of the things that you're finding in the hospital setting going on.
Well, though I meant when the hospital, when it says no males going in, it's more like some of the other cultures that don't allow men at all going in.
Okay.
Or when I walk in, the mom has to cover herself before I help her. Like those kind of cultures. As far as hospital right now, I can say across the board, most hospitals, their rates are low because I think a lot of moms are probably having more home births and not, you know, but also the prenatal education is not being done in the prenatal setting because moms are not going to the prenatal appointment. They're just hanging out until I go to the hospital because I don't want to get COVID, right? And also just the hospital itself has took out a lot of, you know, education because moms can't come to the hospital and we can't be exposed. So, you know, I definitely see across the board more of those weird dips and rates, but we do offer them to breastfeed. Like I had a nurse come to me and she was panicky. She's like, Mom has COVID. Should she breastfeed? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, but she's this and that. And I'm like, no, and I had to go find the policy and give it to her. I'm like, look, this is what mom has to do. It's fine. And she was freaking out. And I'm like, but she's coughing. I'm like, well, that's why she wears a mask. And this is why we have a policy, because me and my this other doctor, we created the policy. And I'm like, it's fine. She can breastfeed. If she wants a pump, we can offer a pump. But these are instructions. So sometimes you get some of that panicky stuff with some of the nurses that get a little nervous. But precautions. I saw a COVID mom today. My husband asked me, he's like, were you scared? I said, no, because, I'm gowned up. I know how to, take it off, and moms need help breastfeeding that have, COVID, and it's just part of my job. But as far as like, lately I've been kind of like, I've been seeing partners, while moms have the baby, most of the younger partners are sleeping through the process of me helping breastfeeding, or they'll go run out of the room and say, I'm gonna go get food, or I'm gonna go take a shower. It's always when I'm in there to help breastfeed. And I'm like, why is that? Why are men just running off and thinking I'm gonna do everything for the mom to breastfeed? And they sleep. They like, one mom, dad gave her a pill and I came in, he went back to bed. And you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, this is her support system. How do we change that? So trying to find ways to get them engaged in how to help moms breastfeed, because he's going to be there for her. I'm hoping to help her. And if he's not watching and seeing the things that happen, I've been seeing that a lot this week, and I've been pretty annoyed by that. Annoyed, like really, come on, let's get involved here. So I think the main thing is like, how do we get fathers more engaged into this process? Why is it that they have to like think it's not part of their process of being a father, right? And I think we need to normalize that role too, and how important the partner is in the mom's breastfeeding journey, right? Because she's going to fall apart at 2 a.m. and he's going to be there like, oh, I don't know what to do, right? Right, Camie?
Right. And if he stayed awake, when you're talking, you might have known a thing or two. Right. Yeah. Wow. Oh, thank you for sharing, Kim. All right. Well, I have one last thing before we leave. Again, thank y'all for joining me. I did get a question about nipple shields. And so 2-week-old baby, and she's doing wonderful on her breastfeeding journey. However, she has flat nipples and has been using a nipple shield in order to, help with the latch. Would love to come off the nipple shield. Wondered if there was some good advice in terms of getting her baby off of a nipple shield onto her breast.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some ideas. So, the first thing I'll say is that my kind of nipple shield caveat is always like, I used to do get off nipple shield or weaning nipple shield consults, right? Like people would, as a lactation consultant, and I would, check in with the family later on, and I would say like, how's it going? What's up? And they'll be like, I got off the shield. I'm like, great. What helped or what worked? And like, I was on the plane and I couldn't find it, and she just had to, baby just had to nurse, or I was on the train, or I was at my sister's, or I was, so, and it was like, it seemed like over and over again that the way many babies get off nipple shields is they're just put into a situation where they need to do it, and it finally clicks, right? And so at that point, I stopped doing consults for getting off shields. I was like, I'm not going to do bills, do charts, do all the work involved with that. So, what I'll say is that tends to be how it goes, is if one day it just clicks, right? Like it just clicks and it works. I will say that, also if you have flat or smooth nipples, that's okay. Like nipple shields are not, I think nipple shields can be a great tool. Both Kim and I, we use them very rarely. And, it'll be very rarely will we suggest we use them. And then, every once in a while we do. I just had a situation where I did with a mom actually with like quote unquote perfect anatomy, right? Like she had nipples that were great, but like there was other stuff going on with baby that he just really needed that additional stimulation of a harder plastic, right? Like to trigger that suck reflex. It had nothing to do with her. So one I'll say is that you know, we call it breastfeeding for a reason. A baby latches onto the breast, they don't latch onto a nipple. And so regardless of how protruding your nipple is, whether it's smooth as, you know, as smooth as possible, or protrudes and comes out 2 inches, like it's really all the same. It's fine. So, you know, chances are like baby will one day it'll just click and it'll work, and there's nothing wrong with your anatomy. Your breasts are fine, your breasts are perfect, they're great the way they are. It's just a matter of like getting baby to know what to do. So some of the tricks that are, you know, tips, I guess, is one is to try and trick baby. So you could do you know, maybe start nursing and then in middle of nursing, take baby off, slide it off. Maybe, you know, start without the shield first while baby isn't super hangry, right? Like they're willing to try a couple times. And then if they get really frustrated, go ahead and put it on. I think like we definitely don't want feeding to be a traumatic experience. So you could do that. You could also, you know, start with certain feeds of the day that you find go especially well. You know, that might be those first early morning feeds where you have a lot of milk in the breast and it kind of just like flows, you know, that type of thing. We find that babies do really well with flow, right? The flow that's there. And so, you know, maybe you want to try it for those first couple morning feeds without the shield first. And then maybe as you get further into the day, into the evening, you just use the shield because you know it's going to be easier, you know, just to like go that route, right? So you could try that as well. Also like sleepy feeds without the shield. So, you know, I see when babies are kind of less in their head, they're a little more primal, right? They're those little primates that they, you know, deep in their brain. So, you know, if they're sleepy, if it's dark, you've set the mood, you know, like you have the whole vibe going on, like you're skin to skin, that like a lot of times baby might just be like, you know, they're just instinctually going to latch on, right? And then the last suggestion I have is to, you know, like get in the tub, kind of recreate birth. You know, it's kind of like this idea. So kind of like, especially if baby's 2 weeks old, you know, they're still really, really fresh and new. And so if you guys get in the water, again, set the mood, get dark, you know, it's dark, put on some good music, candlelight, the whole thing, right? And just get in the water, and that kind of brings baby back to birth for them and kind of like recreate that first latch, right? And kind of give them a new opportunity to try and latch on without the shield. You know, so those are different things you can try. I just feel like keep trying, and eventually, like, they probably will get off of it, you know. But there's also been lots of people that nurse with the shield the entire time they breastfeed, and that's okay too. You know, like it's whatever works and whatever is getting there. And if things are going really well with the shield, I know their pain, I know they're annoying, like, you know, it's frustrating to have to get it on and when your baby's hungry and things like that. But, you know, once you use it for a little while longer, it's just going to be second nature. And, you know, like it might not feel as cumbersome, but, you know, I've definitely seen people that use it the entire time they breastfeed, and that's okay, right? Like just think about what your goal is. And if your goal is to have baby at the breast and this is what is helping to keep baby there, then awesome. Don't stress about it. You know, like the time will come. Do those little things here and there, and chances are it'll just click eventually.
So there's a baby I had, and I echo Camie's suggestions for sure, but there's one way that I did it with a 3-weeker on a virtual consult. She was Navajo, and so we did a video chat, and one, I kind of wanted to observe how she was latching, making sure the latching was good, her position was comfortable, make sure baby had a nice big open mouth to latch the baby. But one thing I did show her to do was she was also flat and she was using a nipple shield, but I had her have the baby suck on the finger for a few seconds, maybe 15, 20 seconds for a little while she had the baby on like suck, and then latch the baby. And then what I did was I had her use a syringe with breast milk and just drip it. Drip, 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 drip. And the baby got on. And I wasn't sure that would work because we tried all these other things. And also she actually, for that day, I had her do lots of skin to skin all day. Where your baby? Where your baby? Where your baby? And then when she felt comfortable and good and baby wasn't too hungry, I had her have the baby suck on the finger and then drip. And then that seemed to help. And as baby does it more, like Camie said, more and more, the baby starts realizing, okay, this is where I get my food. This is what I need to do with my mouth. They actually when I'm working with moms in the hospital, it gets better. Every feeding gets better and better and better and better. When they keep giving formula and formula and formula, it just screws things up more because that flow is so fast that they want that flow. And then with the nipple shield, you got to kind of trick them sometimes, because sometimes you get a baby that just like knows the difference. And so I found that when mom did a lot of skin to skin that day, and then when she found that she was fully at peace to handle a feeding and she had more milk, she was able to get that baby on, and they've been breastfeeding well since. So that could be a quick trick to do too.
Yeah, thank you. Those were great. Thank you so much. It's amazing how our bodies are, as you all were saying, like, you get back to that primal feeling, that skin to skin, that, really tapping into the few things that babies are born with, those reflexes, just getting them to, just hone in on that, and for mom to just relax and know that it's gonna work out. We're gonna figure this out one way or the other, but we'll work it out,
If it's someone have her reach out to me or Camie, and we can work with her if you want. So
I appreciate that. Oh, thank you so much. I thank y'all so much for spending over an hour with me. Oh my goodness. So this was a true treat. And I appreciate y'all's time, love, and everything, and energy. I am so very thankful for having you all in my life, also serving in different capacities all over the place.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so excited. But again, I appreciate you all. And it's so funny, throughout this, we are moms, and so there have been times we all had to mute and be like, so I appreciate y'all.
5 minutes.
Right. And they know that we're on this, with the tone of our voice, and and all this, and then all of a sudden they need everything like right now.
Yeah.
So that was my 20-year-old, so I figure like they would know, but she still comes to me at 20 years old.
Right.
Yeah, right. Hey, this is a long time. You're not this long. He just looked at me. I'm like, okay, well, he's looking at me. So again, I thank y'all for taking some of your evening time to hang out with BSTARS. And so take care. I will think of other great excuses for us to hang out and talk.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Well,
thank you for having us. It was fun.
Thank y'all so much for joining me. All right. Take care, and we will talk soon.
Okay.
Right,
take
care. Everyone. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye. Yes, y'all too. Okay. And broadcast. All right. Hold on. And then I'm ending.